morning, tree climbers. This is Miss Erin and Mr. Brian reporting to you live from Zach's Treehouse on April 26, 2020.
We're interrupting your yard work and gardening time to bring you this week's news.
This is the final week of April, and this is also our last lesson on humility. Last week we talked about how Jesus was the ultimate example of humility and how we can follow his example by putting others first. And putting others first can get our thinking turned upside down, can't it, Mr. Brian?
That's right, Miss Erin. Last week, the Brewer family got our minds thinking differently when we played Opposite Simon Says. Well, this week, we have some college students who are going to do some activities the opposite way to get our minds going in the right direction.
Hey Sycamore Tree, hope you guys are staying safe. Today I'm going to be pouring a cup of water back at the garden hose. And it already spilled over.
Things the opposite way is hard, Miss Erin, like writing with your right hand. You know what? Being humble is hard too. Sometimes we want to do things our way, not God's way.
That's exactly right. The story we're about to show you is about two guys that thought they knew everything that was happening with Jesus' death and resurrection. But they were about to learn that there was a lot more going on with God's plan, and they were about to get help from Jesus himself.
The men were attempting to understand it all while they walked along the road to Emmaus, when suddenly Jesus himself came up and walked alongside them, but God kept them from recognizing who Jesus was. This stranger asked them what they were talking about. This stopped the men in their tracks. One of them, named Cleopas, asked this: "Are you the only person visiting Jerusalem who doesn't know? Don't you know about things that have happened there in the past few days?" Jesus continued to pretend that he didn't know what they were talking about, so the men went on to tell him everything that had happened. He was a prophet. He was powerful in what he said and did, in the sight of God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed Jesus over to be sentenced to death. They nailed him to a cross. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to set Israel free. Also, it is the third day since all of this happened. Some of our women amazed us too. Early this morning they went to the tomb, but they didn't find his body. So they came back and told us what they had seen. They saw angels who said Jesus was alive. Then some of our friends went to the tomb. They saw it was empty, just as the women had said. They didn't see Jesus' body there. Of course, the funny part is that they were telling Jesus about Jesus. Jesus went on to remind them of the scriptures they must have heard since they were children. Words written thousands of years before that told how Jesus would be born, suffer, and die. The men listened intently as they continued to walk to Emmaus with this man who they didn't realize was Jesus. Finally they arrived at the village. The men asked Jesus to stay for a meal, and he agreed. "Everyone, join me around the table." They sat down to eat. Jesus took bread and thanked God for it. He broke it and started to give it to the men. Then God opened their eyes, and they recognized him. It was Jesus! Then, suddenly, Jesus disappeared from their sight. The men realized that they had been something special about this man all along. They said to each other, "He explained to us what the scriptures meant. Weren't we excited as he talked with us on the road?" They knew what they had to do next. They had to tell everyone.
That would have been crazy to just be walking down the road, talking to some random guy, and then realize he's Jesus.
Definitely. When they got back to Jerusalem, the guys told all their friends that they had seen Jesus. It was true. Jesus was alive. They just could not believe how much bigger God's plan was than they expected. And that's good for us to remember too. In fact, there's always more to discover about God's plan.
That's right, Miss Erin. It's good to know that we can trust God, and trusting God is really what humility is all about. Because sometimes humility means admitting you don't know everything, and you have to trust the one who has the plan.
God's plan for us was always good until humans messed up and sin entered the world. But God had a plan for that too when he sent his son Jesus to die for us and be our Savior. Then he came back to life to prove he was God's son. When we decide to follow Jesus, we can have a relationship with him. We know he's always with us, and that relationship can grow every day.
You know, Miss Erin, it's like Jesus helped the men in the story connect the dots about his plan. He helped them understand that everything that had happened to him was all part of God's big story. God can help you understand things about him too.
That's right, Mr. Brian. The most important thing that we can do is to keep learning about God. After all, the more you discover about God, the more you can make a wise choice and follow his plan for your life.
Remember, guys, it's okay to not know all the answers. Even though I think I do, Miss Erin will tell you I don't. Trusting God's plan is an important part of humility. We don't know when we'll get to gather at this church again, but God does, and God's plan is good.
We'll be back next week with the New Life app and Memory Verse. Until then, stay safe, Sycamore Tree.